Hi there, YouTube. Hope you're doing well. We want to put some of our older content that we made on our previous YouTube channel onto this channel. So here is a collection of 7 videos that we made for Trans Awareness Week in 2021, detailing 7 manga that focus on trans people or include trans people in some way that we think are worth reading. It's a list of recommendations. Some of them are officially available in English. Some of them are unfortunately not yet. And some of them have been released in English since the original videos were made. So we hope you will enjoy this video. And yeah, see you in newer content soon. Today is November 13th, the first day of Transgender Awareness Week, which is the week leading up to the Transgender Day of Remembrance, in which we remember the trans people that we've lost in the past year. Because I am a trans person, and because I am someone who reads a lot of manga and light novels and watches anime and such things, I wanted to do something special for this week. And as such, every night I will be recommending a manga about trans people. Just completely unscripted, just going off in a little vlog about it like this. And we're starting with Boys Run The Riot. Boys Run The Riot by Gaku Keito is the story of Ryo. Him right there. He is a closeted trans man. He knows that he's a trans man. Or, well, he has pretty much figured that part out, but he is afraid of coming out. He also has a crush on a male friend of his. And as such, also fears coming out about being trans because of that. Because, of course, being both trans and gay is, well, not the easiest thing to come out about. He also ends up having a bunch of awful rumors going on about him, about, how he's too boyish and like one of the boys. People are speculating that he is sleeping around with all the boys that he's friends with and that he's just a slut. It goes into bullying. It gets really bad. But then he has a chance encounter with another man who asks him if he wants to start a fashion brand with him. The titular Boys Run The Riot is the fashion brand that these two start, and they begin promoting, fashion in various styles, but primarily the sort of modern street style that you see on the covers. There's the other volumes up there, and it goes really well, and he ends up being able to start coming out to, his closest people. And even the fashion brand starts taking off by being featured on like LGBT websites and such things, which also lead, of course, to Ryo eventually having to come out to the public and having to deal with that. It is an ongoing story. It only started 2 years ago, I believe, in Japan. And it is really good. It is very genuine and strong, and I'm a trans woman, so I don't have the trans male perspective, but it's hard to not understand and feel sympathy for Ryo and the other queer characters in the story. And this is where I should probably mention another important thing, and that is that Gaku Keito, the author, is a trans man himself. And I don't want to say you can tell from the writing that that's the case, because that would be dismissive towards writing outside your own experiences, but there is a lot of just truth and genuineness to the writing that you will often miss in trans stories by cis authors. And as such, this is probably, in terms of fiction, the best manga if you want to get an insight into what it's like being trans in Japan. There'll be other fictional books that I'll be talking about this coming week that also deal with that, but this is one straight from the perspective of a trans man in Japan. And the localization, this is the English localization by Kodansha Comics. I should mention that even the translation for this book is done by, and I hope I don't butcher the last name here, Leo McDonough, who is also a queer trans man. So it's, even the localization of this series is like handled by trans people, and it is absolutely wonderful. Just I shouldn't be flipping through the manga like that on camera, but like you can acquire the first 3 volumes right now in English. The 4th volume is coming out soon, and that is the latest volume, I think. And yeah, I mean, it is just, it's good. So that's my first recommendation for Trans Awareness Week. And if you haven't read it yet, you absolutely should. And yeah, I'll see you tomorrow night with another recommendation. So it's day 2 of Trans Awareness Week, and with that comes our second manga recommendation, and today we're looking at Love Me for Who I Am by Konayama Kata. This is another fictional story, and it is wonderful because it is not just a story about a trans person, but several trans people and various LGBTQIA plus individuals. So, the story focuses on the main character here on the cover, Mogumo. Mogumo is non-binary. They do present in a more feminine manner, but they're not a girl, they're not a boy. Actually really love, if you look at the cover here, you have all the Mars and Venus symbols in blue and pink, and then the one, like they're made as cookies, and the one Mogumo is eating is white, and you can't see if it's a Mars or Venus symbol because of it. It's really cute. But they get a chance to work at a Otokonoko cafe when a boy in their school is like, oh hey, I know a bit about these things, a bit about trans stuff. Like my older sibling is a trans woman and runs this cafe. You should come work there. And that's how the story begins. And while Mogumo does not consider themselves an Otokonoko, and we will get into what that term means in a little bit, because of them being trans and coming forward about it, other characters also end up coming forward, such as May, who also works at Cafe Question, which is the name of the cafe, and she's a trans girl. And these two are cross-dressing gay boys. Well, I say gay. I don't think they actually specify their sexuality at any point, but they're queer. That's the point. There's also the character you see here, Kotone, who is a closeted lesbian dealing with her own transphobia, mixing in with her fear of men, and trying to overcome that, and seeing Mogamo not just as a non-man but also as a non-woman. It's really interesting, and it actually goes into pretty deep subject matter in that regard, and all these characters are given a chance to grow and understand each other. It is the only manga I've seen that actually goes to a pride parade. I believe it's in volume 3 or 4. Mogamo, Mei, and Kotone end up going to the Tokyo Rainbow Pride, which is every spring in Tokyo, to help Kotone come out as being a lesbian. And it's a wonderful scene, and it's just so positive and nice. That's not to say that it doesn't deal with some harsher subject matter as well. It does deal with anxiety, it does deal with transphobia, homophobia, self-loathing, suicidal thoughts, and self-harm. Lots of serious subject matter. In fact, Volume 4 and the upcoming Volume 5, which releases in a few months, do have some pretty dark stuff. But ultimately, it's a very positive story, and it deals with these subject matters really well. It's a finished story. The 5th volume is the last one. It finished in Japan last year, and 4 of them are out in English, as you can see. It's being localized by Seven Seas, and I don't know exactly who... I haven't looked into who translates it. I'm sorry, I probably should have done that actually, but it's a wonderful book. So let's talk a little bit about the subject matter of the setting, the Otokonoko Cafe. Now, the term Otokonoko, when literally translated, tends to just be stated as male daughter or daughter of man. And as a result, a lot of people misinterpret that to just mean like, oh, this is like cross-dressing men. What it actually is, it's actually a fetish term from Japan's porn industry that started in the late 90s. The term started in the late 90s to describe not just cross-dressing men in gay porn, although that was a big part of it, but also trans women. And there's always been plenty of non-binary and trans women part of the Otokonoko scene in Japan, and it still is to this day, as we see here with Mei and Mogamo. Even though Mogamo doesn't want to go with the label Otokonoko, they still, want to work at Cafe Question in the end. They still want to be part of this community in the end, and that's important. The less fetishized terms for these things is yoso, which is essentially female wear or women's wear. And what that is essentially dressing and acting out an idealized feminine persona, which is something that cis men will take part in cross-dress, but also trans women are part of the yoso community and use that to help express themselves. And, gender non-conforming trans men might also want to be part in that, and non-binary people as well, of course. Similarly, danso, which is the male wear or menswear version of this, is, about dressing up and acting out an idealized masculine persona. I'm not a big fan of the term masculine persona, but I do indulge in danso myself, and I attend a lot of danso. I went to a lot of danso bars when I was in Japan, and I have a lot of friends who are into that stuff as well. It's very popular, not just with, again, cross-dressing women, but non-binary people, trans women like myself, and of course trans men who use the danso scene to help establish their own self-image. So these things are a crucial component to the LGBT scene in Japan, and I'm really happy how Konoyama Kata captures it through the Otokonoko cafe question. I should mention, Konoyama Kata, we don't know the author's gender here. The author never specifies their gender, but they do talk about how they learned about non-binary being a thing upon researching LGBT matters when wanting to write the story. Because originally, the author they have mainly been writing gay stories between gay men. In fact, the cross-dressing cafe question, or the Otokonoko cafe question, actually stems from an earlier doujin that the author made, but they were focused entirely on cross-dressing men. And when researching things for this new serialized sequel, they ended up learning about non-binary people and more about the queer community, and you can really tell that they connected with the community. And now I don't want to speculate on the author, whether or not the author is non-binary or author is trans or anything like that, but if nothing else, they very much felt deep empathy and took their time to learn things about the LGBT scene, which is wonderful. And honestly, this is one of the best books I have ever read. And yeah, I love this book so much, and I hope you read it. If you haven't read it already, you really should. It is wonderful. It is so queer. It is so positive without being sugar-coated. This is the good stuff. Go read Love Me for Who I Am. Today, on the third day of Trans Awareness Week, we are looking at To Strip the Flesh by Toda Oto. Now, this is actually a collection of stories, but the titular story, To Strip the Flesh, is the one we will be talking about because it's a story about a trans man, specifically him. This is Shiaki, and he knows he's a trans man. He's known, well, since he was a little boy. But he's in the closet due to an unfortunate event during his childhood that led to his father basically telling him to be more like a girl, to not, risk his life and such, as his father is a hunter and there was a hunting related accident that came about because Shiaki wanted to be like his dad. But what the actual main meat of the story revolves around is him coming out and going through with his transition. So Shiaki is a YouTuber as an adult, and he is fairly popular, but everyone sees him as a woman. And he suffers a lot of sexist comments and online harassment from creeps, and it's just bad and it sucks, especially since he, tries to present, more tomboyish, but he has a large chest, and as a result, the comments are what they are. It's deeply uncomfortable to read, to be perfectly honest, and being a trans person who is visibly online and visibly trans, it hit it home for me, even if my experience is different from that of a trans man in this regard. When Shiaki finds out that his father is terminally ill, he starts thinking about what would happen if he fell ill, if he died. And he doesn't want to die with the world seeing him as a woman. And that's ultimately what pushes through his... Like, that's what pushes him to finally go through with it, to come out, to go through with things. And it's a pretty long story for a story in an anthology like this. But because of that, it deals with a lot of things after coming out. The entire transition process, while somewhat fast-forwarded, is covered really well, including top surgery and hormones, and the fact that a lot of trans people in Japan end up having to go to other countries to go through with things like their surgery. It's I sort of want to say it's a fairly graphic book, but not in the sense that it's gory or even like sexual, but there's a lot of nudity, there's a lot of exploration of the fact that Chiaki has this body that makes people, bad people, behave a certain way towards him, and how much that hurts him, and how he just wants to strip the flesh from his body like the carcasses that his father brings home from hunting. And I won't give away how it ends. I won't give away how things unfold between Chiaki and his father, as well as Takato, which is his friend, who is also the only person who knows that Chiaki is trans at the start of the story. Both wonderful characters, really good chemistry between these two, and yeah, it's wonderful. Now, as you might have noticed, this is a Japanese copy. This is not out in English yet, but it is coming out next year. To Strip the Flesh was picked up by... I forgot. Viz Media, right. Viz Media. To Strip the Flesh was picked up by Viz Media and will be releasing, I believe, spring next year. So, definitely something to look for at that time. There is a fan translation of To Strip the Flesh, although it's called Stripping the Flesh instead. But with the official localization coming out, I would urge people to support the official release if they can. Now, you might have recognized the name Tora Oto if you are a Shihaya Furu fan, because Tora Oto was actually the illustrator on one of the Shihaya Furu manga. The second series, I believe. So it was kind of a surprise, to me at least, seeing his name suddenly appear on, a trans story that talks about LGBT matters and what it's like transitioning, and does so really, really well. If I didn't know who Tora Oto was going in, I would have guessed this was written by a trans person. And I believe that's the greatest praise you can give a cis author, or as far as we know at least, cis author who writes about trans people. It is absolutely lovely, and I hope everyone picks it up next year when it releases in English. And I will end by just showing one page from the book of what Chiaki looks like after he has transitioned, because I don't want you to just have the image of his self that he doesn't like. So here, that's him right there. To Strip the Flesh. Very, very good book. Definitely get your hands on it ASAP. Next year when it comes out. Or if you can read Japanese, import it. See you tomorrow. Hello, it is now day 4 of Trans Awareness Week, and we have another manga to talk about. This is Boku ga Watashi ni Naru Tame by Hirasawa Yuna. This is an autobiography, and it is not available in English. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. And it's a wonderful book. Yuna, who is a trans woman, tells the story of her transition, in particular her journey to Thailand, where she had her gender reaffirmation surgeries. Now, it is a very funny book. Like it is like it's a comedy on top of being an autobiography, and it goes into various things such as, you know, how the nurses behaved after the surgery, and like what the procedures were, what it was like getting used to having new genitals, and it's really quite interesting. Like it is a very it's a very honest look, and like just very open look into that part of transitioning that so many trans people do go through, or at least want to go through with. This was actually the first detailed account of gender reassignment surgery that we got to read, and we actually reached out to Yuna after this and spoke with her briefly on Twitter. And she's a lovely and cool person. She has other manga as well that are, fictional serialized works. But this is like this was her big breakthrough, this personal autobiography, and it's a real shame that it's not available in English, because it has been localized into German. Now, as I mentioned, the Japanese title is Boku ga Watashi ni Naru Tame, and that essentially translates to my journey to be me, or my journey to become me. And similarly, the German title, which I've written down here, I'm looking at, is Yuna's Reise zum Ich. So Yuna's journey or trip to become herself. And it's really odd that it's been localized into German but not English, because that clearly shows that the license is available, and yet it hasn't been picked up. And I have been recommending it to, Yen Press and Seven Seas and Kodansha and all these various manga localization groups for years now. Like this released in when did this release? Oh, it's just right there. 2016. This released in 2016, and it was new when I got it. I got it before my trip to Japan in 2017. So like, it's been over 5 years and it hasn't been localized yet, and it's just a shame, because it's really good. It's really funny. It's a very genuine and just strong account of being a trans person. Like, we've looked at a lot of fictional stories this week. We've only looked at fictional stories this week, actually. But like autobiography, of course, is also very important to have. And with the success of, other trans manga that we've been talking about, and also perhaps most famously, The Bride Was a Boy. We'll be talking about that one later in the week. Spoilers, I guess. But with that one being a big success as well, I was really expecting this to get picked up. So this is where I want your help. If you are a trans person or a trans ally and you want to see more trans manga localized, tell publishers. Tell the publishers. Tell Seven Seas, Viz Media, Yen Press, J Novel Club is not going to help us here. Kodansha Comics. What else do we have here? Square Enix, they also do manga now. Like, tell them. Because this should get more released. Who put out... No, those are the same ones I already said. Okay, never mind. They won't mimic you. This is a very chaotic episode now. But, like, please get this localized. Again, it's Boku ga Watashi in Naru Tame. I mean, I'll be writing it down there as well. So, let's try and get this localized, because Yuna's story is one that I feel everyone deserves hearing. And if it gets localized into English, that will probably mean it will get localized into more languages. And the more the better, honestly. So that's my little chaotic video on I'm not forgetting the name. I just realized I had no idea how to finish that sentence. This is why I don't do much unscripted stuff anymore. See you tomorrow. Well then, we have reached day 5 of Trans Awareness Month, and today we are looking at The Bride Was a Boy by Chi. This is probably the most famous transgender manga, and we actually thought maybe we shouldn't talk about it, because it's probably one that everyone has already, been made aware of. But then we realized that it would also feel wrong to not talk about it. And, even the most popular things relating to trans people is still struggling to reach out to the world. So, here we are. This is another autobiography manga, like the one we talked about yesterday. This one is a bit different though. It is structured more as a comedy, and with a lot of like 4-panel style comics. It's also not focused primarily on one event in Chi's life. It is her entire transition, and of course eventual marriage to her husband. And she as in her name, not her pronoun. She is a very, very good author. She's a very funny author. The jokes in here, they land. They're really, really, really funny. And you really get a good feel for both the struggles that she faced, before coming out and after coming out, but also how happy she is in her current life. Now, she is also someone who does a lot of LGBT comics in general. She actually does a webcomic that goes into various LGBT topics and explains LGBT terminology. And there's stuff like that in this one as well. For example, here she goes into what LGBT means. And there's actually, you also get to learn the Japanese terminology here if you read the English version. So for example, you have here lesbian, which most of the time you will just hear lesbian, but the actual Japanese word for it is yosei dosei aisha, which is essentially female same-sex lover. And of course, dansei dosei aisha, that I butchered that, I'm sorry, is a gay man. Ryosei aisha, which is bisexual. And this was one that I didn't know before I read this book. Seibetsui kosha. That's transgender in Japanese. Now, most trans people in Japan use either the MTF, FTM, MTX, FTX, or Transgender as their definition today. But, there still exist words for it in Japanese, and that's important and good to know. And it makes this a very fun mix between both a very personal story for she as well as a good educational book. Now, unfortunately, this is where I have to talk about some bad stuff. Not with the book itself, but with the response to the book. Because this book was just banned in Texas this month. Maybe it was last month. Yeah, Texas put out a list of like books that are not allowed to be, I'm assuming, put in public libraries and schools and stuff like that. And to everyone's surprise, this manga was on it. The Bride Was a Boy. Because it talks about trans issues and frames it in a positive way. Yeah, that's awful. It is horrible. But, of course, in better news, this has been a big hit since it released in English. It was put out by Seven Seas. And, it was... We would probably say this was kind of the start of transgender manga becoming big in the West. After this, we got stuff like Boys Run The Riot, Love Me For Who I Am, and the upcoming The Strip of Flesh that we've talked about. And, I'm like, we're really thankful that this is the one that was put out, because we have the book in Japanese, and we read it in Japanese, and with the help of fan translations and stuff like that initially, and we really kept pushing for it to get localized, and it did, and that is just wonderful. It also talks about just various oddities, like the fact that she got married as a woman to a man, and what that is like in Japan. There are various odd little quirks about that. Like, for example, if you are the second son in a family, so you're written in the registry as the second son because you have an older brother, and then you come out as trans, and you change your legal gender, but you don't have any sisters, your number doesn't change. You're now the second daughter, but there is no first daughter. Because that's apparently how the registry in Japan handles it. And just little interesting details like that. So this is a very important book, and it's currently under attack from Texas legislatures, and that's awful. So we definitely wanted to feature it, even though it's probably the one you will definitely have heard about. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't get spread. So, The Bride Was a Boy by She. And do check out She's webcomic as well. They're not officially translated into English, but there tends to be fan translations available of it. And She supports those fan translations as well. She actually retweets them from time to time, even. So don't feel bad about those fan translations. They are completely approved by She. Her. Pronouns. Tomorrow, we do have a video planned, but we're also going on a trip. So, depending on how things go, there might not be a video tomorrow. However, there will be more videos like this, regardless. And not just for Trans Awareness Week. We want to do more things like this in general. So, do look forward to that. And hopefully we will get the last two videos out as planned. And we also have a video planned for Transgender Day of Remembrance. But, yeah. See ya. Hello everyone, and it's Trans Awareness Week Day 6. As we mentioned last episode yesterday, we're on a trip right now. so we weren't sure we were going to be able to film this, but here we are filming it, albeit in not the best setup, very iffy lighting and stuff like that, but it's what we have right now. Also, no physical book, unfortunately, for the same reasons. Today we're talking about something a little bit different, because this is actually not the story of a trans person, but it's a story that involves trans people and talks about transness from the Japanese perspective in general. And the reason we picked this work is because it's Trans Awareness Week, so we really wanted to give more direct accounts from Japanese authors about the trans scene in Japan, which is obviously something that trans people in the West might not know that much about. So today we're looking at Otokonoko Doushi Renai Chu by Fumiko Fumi and Oshima Kaoru. And first off, Fumiko Fumi has actually written another manga that is a bit more famous than this one. It's called Bokura no Hentai, and it's about two cross-dressing boys and one closeted trans girl, and they meet up and, you know, talk about themselves, and they go through various pretty traumatic experiences, and that's one of the reasons I didn't want to talk about this on this one, because it gets pretty rough and arguably a bit exploitative, and felt like it might not be the best pick for something like this. But this work, as we just mentioned, is also done with Oshima Kaoru. Now, who is Oshima Kaoru? Oshima Kaoru is a former gay porn star, or a Japanese adult video actor. JAV is the general short form for Japanese pornography. And he is also the man that became sort of the poster boy for the Otokonoko scene. Now, we talked about Otokonoko back in day 2 when we talked about Love Me For Who I Am, about how that is a fetish term that involves cross-dressing men, trans women, and just the general, like, sort of sexy idea of gender nonconformity from bodies that are assigned male at birth, be they, as we mentioned, cis men or FTM, MTF, trans women, or MTX, non-binary folks. And this manga is a sort of short form chronology of Oshima Kaoru's life. And you might first think that, oh, well, isn't that just a story of a gay man then? A gay cis man who cross-dresses? Well, that's who he is, yes. But because he was there from the start of the Otokonoko scene and has been a part of it even after he stopped doing porn, a lot of the people he met, a lot of people that helped him, you know, perform better in the Otokonoko scene were trans women. And it also involves his ex-lover. They were still dating at the time, although they don't use the real name of the partner in the book itself. And I should mention that Oshima Kaoru is also a stage name. She actually comes out as a trans woman in the story, or in the retelling story. It's a true story. And it's really interesting to just get the perspective of, you know, a man within this field meeting another man in that field and learning that, oh, my partner's a trans woman, and it not being a source of, like, conflict or a reason for him to feel disgusted or anything like that. No, he is fully supportive of this because he has been, involved with trans people for a long time. In addition to this, there's other trans people. In fact, and I guess this is a bit of a spoiler, but it's a true story, so this is history. But his ex-lover, or I should say ex-girlfriend, her brother comes out as a trans man as well, which was just this really cute little coincidence that they go into, and they go to like a danzo bar and ask for like suggestions for how he can appear, boyish more, and it's just really sweet. Now, we should mention, of course, that because this is the story of a porn star or a former porn star, the book is, not safe for work. It deals with some erotic elements. I believe that's also part of why Oshima picked Fumiko Fumi for this, because they have done previous cross-dressing and trans ero manga, so it made perfect sense to go to them for this particular book. Now, Otokonoko Doushi Renai has not been picked up for localization anywhere from what we know, actually. But it's one of those that we really hope people will ask to see published, because on top of things like The Bride Was a Boy and other autobiographical accounts becoming more popular, including the Confessions of a Male Porn Star, I think is the name, which is actually another manga about a straight porn star. Like the fact that these are coming out now and doing pretty well leaves me hopeful that we can get more of these, because they are such an important insight into queer culture outside of the Anglosphere, which is normally all we get. Like, yeah, we learn queer history from the US, from the UK, and then nothing else. Like, we're from Sweden, and we know more about American and British queer history than we do Swedish queer history. And not because we haven't tried learning about it, but because that's just how much US and UK stuff seeps into us, So that's also part of why we like learning about other countries and other cultures' queer scenes and queer history. It's just very important to us. And this book was one such book. It's a pretty short book. It's only 4 or 5 chapters. But we do definitely recommend it. And as always, do ask, Seven Seas, Yen Press, Viz Media, Square Enix, Kodansha, whatever publisher you want to ask about it. Ask them to localize it, and hopefully they will. And I guess that's our suggestion for day 6. Tomorrow's the last day of Trans Awareness Week, but as we said yesterday, that doesn't mean we won't be doing more things like this in the future. It just means that we won't be doing them daily. So we will see you tomorrow. Take care. Right, it's Trans Awareness Week. Last day, day 7. We have kind of got into Pokemon mode. But we still have one more manga to talk about, so let's talk about it. Today we're talking about a classic work. This is Double House by Haruno Nanai, who is probably more known as the author of Pieta, which is also a classic queer manga. So, this is the story of Maho and Fujiko. Maho is a trans woman. She works at a trans run bar. And Fujiko is a gender non-conforming cis woman who have sort of fled her home, and the two end up moving in together and start developing feelings for each other. It is one of the very, very few published manga that involve trans women in relationships with cis women. With that said, it is not exactly a romance story. Double House is a drama. It is fairly serious about its subject matter. It's also fairly short. It's actually only 3, admittedly somewhat long chapters. The first 2 focusing on Maho and Fujiko, and the third one focusing on a side character who is also a trans woman. But even so, it is a fantastic story. Now, this book came out in, I want to say 2000. Maybe it was even earlier than that, actually. It might have been like 99 or something. I should have looked it up ahead of time, but I didn't. But it's truly wonderful. It really also captures what we feel is the core inclusiveness that the queer community should have. Where, Fujiko, the gender non-conforming cis woman, she's the one who falls for Maho, the trans woman, seeing her as a woman and still very much falling for her as a woman. But it's also, it's Maho, the trans woman, who takes in Fujiko, and they start, living together as a result of that. And it becomes this very nice domestic queer situation where, even though there are blossoming feelings of love, which I should mention don't really go anywhere because this is a very short story, it's still just really sweet and warm and comforting to see these things. The bar where Maho works is also really interesting and really inviting and inclusive and nice. And while we read this as an outsider, because we're obviously not Japanese and we don't live in Japan, we have been to Japan and we have been to various queer bars and queer clubs in Japan, and not to oversell them because we don't want to risk exotifying them, but in the best of those places, this inviting and very comforting feeling towards transness is something we felt as well. Now, obviously, it's been 20 years since this book came out, and there's been more progress since then. So maybe this book is a bit more idealistic in how it framed some things, and maybe we've just reached that now. But regardless, it is comforting, and it is just a really nice story about queer women. Yeah. I'm not sure what else to say. Like, we can't even really spoil it that much because the spoiler is that the two of them have a domestic situation and get closer. Technically, they actually don't live in the same apartment. They actually live in 2 separate apartments in the same building, hence the name Double House. But they effectively live together. So yeah, do check this one out. Again, this is another one that has not been localized into English. Ever so often you will see classic manga, that's the same manga that's been, out of print or out of serialization for, 10, 15, 20 years. You'll still see those get localized every so often. In fact, when 7Cs do their surveys, they specifically tend to ask for, do you have any classic manga earlier than X date to request? And we think people should be requesting Double House because it's a lovely little story. And yeah, that's kind of it. That's been Trans Awareness Week. We have looked at 7 transgender themed manga. Some of them autobiographical, some of them fictional. And we're quite happy with the fact that we were able to pull this off. Now, obviously, tomorrow is Transgender Day of Remembrance, which is a important but sad and solemn day. We might be putting out a video for that. It won't be a manga recommendation video. But it all depends on how we manage and feel about things, because as we mentioned several times now, we are on a trip away from home, and we're not able to work on videos as much as we would like to, and we were already not working on videos as much as we would like to before that. And we're not just saying this because we have Pokemon to play. We can multitask just fine. But yeah. Thank you so much for having watched this little series of manga recommendation vlogs. We don't normally do unscripted content like this, so it was a fun little experiment. And we, as we mentioned, we will do this more in the future because we did enjoy this. If you like my work, if you want to help support us, we have a Patreon and we have a Coffee. There are links in the description to both. You don't have to, but if you do, that'd be awesome. And you can of course subscribe and like the videos that we have put out. Follow us on Twitter at FeoUltima. And with that said, we believe that's the end of Trans Awareness Week and these little videos. So, see you next time. By the way, look at my cool Mewtwo shirt that my friend got me.